Today's update forces us to pause and take stock of the Pope's visit to Cameroon. As we all witness it, for days Cameroon stopped everything. For days the country paused. Conversations shifted. The Pope came. And for a moment, it felt like something bigger than politics had taken over. He landed in Yaoundé and flew to Bamenda the very next day, moved through Douala, and ended right back in Yaoundé before leaving the country. Roads were secured, convoys moved, stadiums were prepared, choirs rehearsed, protocol activated. And for a brief moment, Cameroon looked organized, except for that moment in Yaoundé during the broadcast. Coordinated, almost functional. And for many believers, it meant something deeper than politics. It meant presence. It meant recognition. It meant God had not forgotten Cameroon. And even after he left, people were still watching, hoping, waiting, looking for signs of impact, looking for change. But almost a week later, the reality feels different. Should I say the same? Because while the message was still fresh, while the sermons were still echoing, the country did not pause for reflection. While the Pope's message was still fresh, while the sermons were still echoing, the guns did not go silent. As you know, on April 26, 2026, reports of killings in Bui Division in the northwest region of Cameroon entered the public conversation again. The kind of report that reminds you that the war in southern Cameroon, often called Anglophone crisis, does not pause for ceremonies. The visit ended, but fear remained. The prayers ended, but the war remained. And that is where the silence becomes loud. Because if this was a moment of national reflection, it did not translate into national change. So people begin to ask quietly, what exactly did this visit leave behind? And then in the middle of that question, something else drops. Not a speech, not a policy, a number. 50 billion francs CFA. That is the figure now circulating in Cameroon's public space, as spearheaded by the French magazine Jeune Afrique. A publication we all know has had over the years a reputation of consistently breaking sensitive stories on power, money, and governance across Francophone Africa, including Cameroon. And in this country, when numbers like this surface, people pay attention. Not because everything published is automatically true, but because experience has taught Cameroonians something very simple. Where there is smoke, there is often fire. So the question is not whether people should talk about the number. The question is why, in a matter of this magnitude, the state remains silent. Because silence in governance is not neutrality. Silence is a position. And so let's remain precise, because the 50 billion figure is reported, relayed, and serious enough to demand receipts. And that accountability sits squarely under the authority of Paul Biya's government, with ministries fully mobilized, with state structures activated. The same state that repeatedly tells citizens there is no money. So the question becomes simple. If Cameroon spent anything close to that amount, what did the country get in return? Because at the very same moment this number is circulating, something else happened. Something quieter, but far more telling. The European Union announced 16.6 million euros in humanitarian aid for Cameroon. That is roughly 10.8 billion francs CFA, not for ceremonies, not for protocol, but for food, health, nutrition, water, shelter, education, for nearly 3 million people in need, including about 2.2 million displaced persons living the daily reality of the Northwest and Southwest crisis, floods, insecurity, and economic strain. And that is where the story turns. Cameroon did not fund food, Europe did. Cameroon did not fund survival, Europe did. But Cameroon may have funded spectacle. One keeps people alive, the other keeps appearance alive. 50 billion for a visit, 10 billion to keep people alive. So again, the question stands: who is governing and who is rescuing? And here's the truth. If Cameroon can mobilize this level of coordination, this level of money, this level of efficiency for 4 days, then Cameroon is not a poor country. It is a country that chooses when to function. And that is what makes this dangerous. Because it means the problem is not capacity. The problem is choice. And that choice is what citizens are reacting to. Because this is not about attacking faith. Cameroon is a deeply religious country. Churches build schools. Churches run hospitals. Churches provide structure, especially where the state sometimes fails. People tithe. People give to the church. People believe. This is real. That should be respected. But faith is not blindness. And faith cannot be used to silence questions about public money. Even the Pope himself, during his visit, spoke about corruption, about justice, right there beside Paul Biya, about credibility in public institutions, and about unequal distribution of wealth, about authority being service, not domination. Those were his words. That is why this message is important. So if that message means anything, then the first place it must apply is not in sermons. It must apply in governance. So again, the question becomes simple. If money was spent, who approved it? Was it the presidency, ministries, local councils, public corporations, state-owned companies, private donors, the church itself, a combination of all the above? Who received contracts? Security firms, transport logistics, stage construction, sound systems, hotels, media coverage, fabric production, seating arrangements. You can go on and on. Accreditation systems, roadworks. Who got those deals? What was temporary? What is still here? What remains today? Because if after all this, nothing remains except memories, images, and headlines, then Cameroon did not invest. Cameroon performed. Not that we're surprised. And that is happening in a country where elections are delayed. Key elections, mandates are extended, and the public is told the process needs more time, more logistics, and more money. As you know, in March 2026, the government advanced financial constraints and organizational challenges as reasons to extend the mandate of parliamentarians to December 20th, 2026. And around the same period, moves were made to adjust the electoral code to give greater flexibility to Mr. Paul Biya over municipal mandates, again tied to the management of elections. So when people hear 50 billion francs CFA around a papal visit, they are not being dramatic. They are doing civic mathematics. And it is also an institutional question, because where is the National Assembly? Where is the Senate? These are the bodies that are supposed to represent the people, to scrutinize budgets, to question executive spending, to demand reports. Yet, time and again, they move quickly when it comes to extending expired mandates or validating bills that come from a toady. But when it comes to probing how public money is used, the urgency disappears. And Cameroonians remember. Yes, they remember 2009, during the visit of Pope Benedict XVI. The name was Jean-Pierre Biiti Biesam, then Minister of Communication. He was later linked to controversy over funds for media coverage of that visit. And diplomatic reporting is very clear on referring to about 700 million francs CFA. And as we know, the number climbed up to 770 million francs CFA, including money reportedly deposited in his private bank account. The explanation was almost too familiar, that the money was kept there because it could have been stolen. That moment did not only raise eyebrows, it revealed a system where public money can move quietly, privately, and strangely until pressure forces the story into daylight. So when new numbers surface today, after the Pope's visit, Cameroonians are not reacting in a vacuum. They are reacting with memory. This is not all. Talk about the can. So this is the standard that must change. This is not about disrespecting the Pope. This is not about rejecting faith. This is about respecting citizens. Show the budget. Show the breakdown. Show the contracts. Show the truth. Because a papal visit can inspire. It can bring hope. It can unify people, even if briefly. But hope is not an audit. Prayer is not a budget line. And faith is not a receipt. If 50 billion was not spent, say it clearly. If it was, explain it fully. Because in the end, this was never just about the Pope. It was a moment, a test. And Cameroon passed that test, not by what it said, but by what it funded. And when a country shows you its priorities, you don't argue with it. You believe it. I hope we are on the same page. It doesn't end here. This is just the beginning. Hope to see you in the next one. Have a wonderful day.